start the recording and I will share. Oh, that sounds flash, doesn't it? I'll share the screen. So you should be able to see, can you see a different screen now? Can you see the presentation?
Kingdom finances.
Yes, right. I will go back to
Finances.
Can you see that now? So I think I've got
Kingdom finances.
Okay, awesome. So I've got a few thoughts, and this may be into two different topics, but the first topic is it's very generic. So it's something that would be helpful for you as an individual, for business, and for your church ministry. And it might seem as though it's a little bit non-biblical, but I think you'll see as we go through that it is. So I'm trying to look at handling personal and church finances in a kingdom way. And my experience of what happens in in Uganda, and I'm assuming Kenya is similar, is that there is little accountability for the finances in many churches. And Ugandan in particular have trying to address this issue by insisting that pastors are trained before they can be pastors. And there are charlatans. We know that there are charlatans that just fleece people for money and have no accountability. So I'm going to look at a few things that you can start to put into play in kingdom finances. So my training is as an accountant. I am an accountant by profession. And so these terms are something I'm very familiar with in my work that I used to do. So we will carry on. Why is that? There we go. So I just want to mention a few accounting, I'll put you guys over there. I want to mention a few accounting terms before we go on much further. Where can I put you? There. So these are a few accounting terms that you may or may not be familiar with. And the first one is a profit and loss account. Now, a profit and loss account is a schedule. I've got some echo happening, so I'll just.
Yes.
Can you hear me? You can hear me? Yes? So the profit and loss account, I just want to check, Peter, you can hear me. So can you give me a thumb up if you can hear? Can you hear?
Yes, I'm here.
You can hear
you.
You can hear me?
We are hearing you.
All right, cool. All right.
Yes.
So the profit and loss account is a schedule that shows all the income and expenses of a business. And you could put in a church in that phrase. You could say all the income expenses of a church, all the income expenses of your personal finances. And it usually covers a period in time, and that's generally 12 months or 1 year. And it will show the surplus or the deficit, or in other terms is profit or loss of that particular activity that's being measured. So that's the first statement. The second statement is the balance sheet. And that is a schedule that lists all the assets and liabilities of a business at a particular point in time. And I'll explain what assets and liabilities mean in a moment. And then the third thing is the owner's equity. Now, this is a schedule that shows the investment an owner has put into a business, and the owner's equity is usually shown on the balance sheet. So basically, we've got two statements. We've got this profit and loss account, and we've got the balance sheet. Now, I'm doing this in very sort of simplified terms. In some places, these get called slightly different things, but if you can just grasp the concept that the first one is looking at all the income and expenses of a business over a period, and the second one is listing all the assets and liabilities of a business at a particular point in time. So what kind of things goes on the income side? We're looking now in particular at the profit and loss account. So on the income side, we would write down all the income from all sources. That might be gifts or donations or offerings or tithes, everything that comes in from any source that's coming into this business entity. And then on the other side, we'll have expenses, and that's a list of all the expenses in relation to that business. That might be for the pastor's salary, the rent for the building, electricity, any maintenance that goes on, and things like that. And the key to both these items, the income and the expense, if we were, say, for example, relating it to a church, is this expense relevant to this particular business activity? Is it a business activity or is it personal expenditure? So that's quite a key thing when we start to put some numbers together. So then the other statement is the balance sheet, and this one lists all the assets and liabilities of a business. So assets are the things that the business owns. So that might be tables and chairs, music equipment, loudspeakers, microphones, things like that that business owns, and cash that the business has. And then liabilities are the things that the business owes to other people. So that might be rent for the landlord, the power company, we might owe some money there. So it's things that they owe to other people. And they're listed at a particular point in time. So, and it's generally at the end of the period that we do the profit and loss. So if we made a profit and loss account, for example, to the end of March, then we would do a balance sheet as at the end of March. Okay. Whoa, lots of numbers. Do you like math at school? Those people that don't like math at school, when they see something like this, kind of go, but it's just numbers. So this is an example of what those two statements might look like. So we've got this church that's called Church United, and it has a year end 31st of March. And it lists out here all its income that it's received in the year from all these different sources. So offerings, tithes, donations, and its income that's received in the year is 35,000. You can put your own numbers in there. And then it's had some expenses. It's paid some rent for the land. It's paid the pastor some salary, and it ran a crusade and had some crusade expenses. So the total expenses were 33,000. So you can see that they made a profit or a surplus for that year of 2,000. So that's the 33, take away 35. So that's kind of how it would be listed. All the income listed, all the expenses listed, and then one taken away from the other to give you the surplus for the year. Now this 2,000 here goes across into the balance sheet as surplus for the year. So you can just see that that number's coming across there. So then we look at the balance sheet for Church Unlimited, and their year was 31st of March. So they went from April to March. And so we put the balance sheet as at 31st of March. So at the 31st of March, we're doing like a snapshot of everything that the church owns at that point in time. So this church has been going for a while. This is not their first year. They had some cash. They had 7,000 in cash. The instruments, they've paid 15,000 for them in the past. And so their total assets that they've got, the 7,000 and the 15,000 is 22,000. But then they owe some money, like they owe their landlord some rent. So they they have to pay him 7,000 at some point in time. So that's a liability. So their working capital, that's another term, is 17. So you can see that coming from the 22,000 of assets that they had, these two numbers, less what they have to pay to the landlord. So they have 17,000. Now, there's another phrase here, which we call retained earnings. So that's things from previous years that have been just accumulated. And we have the 2,000 that's come from this year's surplus added onto the retained earnings, and that's the total equity. That's another sort of term that gets used. So you can see that this church is worth $17,000. And if we were to stop the church, then we would have these instruments, which we hope are worth 15,000 still, and we would have this cash, and we would have paid the landlord. So that's why we call it working capital. So that's a quick introduction and overview of a balance sheet and a profit and loss. And it's something that you can produce for anything. Like you could, this example is for a church for a year, but you could do something similar for a crusade that was run, or another project that a building project, like you guys are building your church. So you could actually work out how much it's costing to build your church, and in your church's balance sheet, that would become a asset. The church building structure that you're producing would become an asset sitting in this part of the balance sheet. And then all the donations that's coming in would be over in this side. So hopefully I haven't given you too many numbers, and it's just an illustration for you to get a bit of an understanding of what that's all about. So let's move on, click on. So why do we need to do this? We need to be seen to handle the money in a transparent way, because we need to be able to show how we've accounted for the money that comes into our church and how we've used it with integrity. And the Bible talks to us about being good stewards of the finances that come into our hands, and actually using that money well to advance the kingdom. It also teaches discipline to church members to do the same thing with their personal finances. And we'll have a look at that in a few minutes as we move along. It tells us, it lets the members feel an ownership of what's going on and how their money is spent, that they've given in the church in tithes and offerings, how it's spent in the events that the churches are running, and makes them aware of the cost of running a church building, how much it actually costs to run a church. Like somebody has to pay the bills, somebody has to make sure the rent's paid and the power's paid, and that instruments are bought that belong to the church and then are looked after with integrity, and don't just disappear if for some reason the church ceases to exist, that the pastor's not run off with the money and things like that. So all those are reasons why we'd be well pressed. It'd be a good idea to do something like this, to just keep a record of the church's finances. And in New Zealand here, the churches are, most churches, in fact, probably every church is registered with what we call the Charities Commission, and they have to present their finances every year and file them with the Charities Office. And that reminds me, I've got some to do for some of the voluntary organizations I do some work for. So the whole thing is transparent of what's happened with the money. Just let him in. And it's a good discipline to get ourselves into. So let's just move along. Does this have an implication for handling our own finances, our own personal finances? And I think the answer is yes. we don't necessarily have to produce a balance sheet and profit and loss for our family finances, but it's very helpful to actually, in some ways, run our family in like a business way, and that everybody who is in the family, obviously not our very young children, but some children that are starting to get a little bit more aware of how to handle money, it gives them a good understanding, teaches them discipline on how to handle money as well as they grow themselves. So handling money in the family in a transparent way, that I have a story of a wife who spent all the money that was given to pay for accommodation for missionaries that were coming to do ministry in their church. And instead of paying for the accommodation to the hotel, she went on a shopping spree and spent all the money, which is obviously not a very good thing to be doing. So within a family of handling money, it helps to account for that money that comes into the family. We've got integrity going on there again, and becoming good stewards of the finances that come into our hands. It teaches discipline to our children on how to handle money and the value of things, and that things are not free. Things have to be earned, and things have to be bought, and yes, so on. And the family all can feel part of the decision made on how the family finances are allocated, particularly in an area of family giving. Now, obviously, children have got, as they grow, they've got limited understanding. So some of this gets adjusted for the ages of the children. But as children get into their teenage years, they can certainly be involved in some of this family decision making. We don't need to put worry and stress of running a family on them, but we can hopefully encourage them to start to learn how to handle money. And I think one of the things that we do very poorly, I don't know who's ringing. I don't know who's ringing, and I'm going to ignore it, okay? One of the things we do very poorly is actually teach our children how to handle money. So I just wanted to look, I looked up a few scriptures of what God says in the Bible about money. And there's many, and you can find some more for yourself. Proverbs 22:7 talks about the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Matthew 5:42, give to him who asks and from him who wants to borrow, and do not turn away. Luke 6:35, love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great in heaven. Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters. I think you're all probably aware of that one. Romans 13:8, let no debt remain outstanding except the debt to love one another. And Psalm 37:21, the wicked borrows and does not repay, but the righteous shows mercy and gives. And as I was reading through those scriptures, and there were many more, it was almost like I was thinking to myself, well, Lord, this is all assuming that we've got money to give, because we can't just keep on giving, because obviously we have all got limited resources. But I began to think, because you can start to get, I'm not going to give anymore because I've got to look after and pay for all my bills and haven't got enough to give away to you. But for these scriptures to be in there, it must mean that God is quite aware of our needs of finances, and for him it's not a problem. And for us, the problem is learning how to actually call down the blessings in heaven. In Ephesians, it talks about we have been blessed with every heavenly blessing, and that includes finances and stuff. And I don't agree with the prosperity gospel as it's been tainted, grab it, blab it and grab it kind of phrase that gets thrown around. If you ask for this, you're going to get your money, it's going to fall out of heaven. I think there is some truth in it, but I think there is a lot more that we're missing. And quite often we try to go for the easy route. But just a quick look at some of these scriptures, and if you just did a Google search, you'll find that there's many scriptures like this where God has not got any problem with us being the ones that are lending. He's expecting us to be the head and not the tail, to be the ones that have got the power to give in the way that these scriptures imply. And I don't know about you, but I've got a little bit of a way to go because I'm still paying my bills and I've got very little left over to give to others. So let's have a look a bit further at some things that we could help us get some grasp of how to handle our finances. So in Proverbs 24 verse 7, it's quite an interesting verse that I haven't really paid it much attention. It says, oh, just hang on, who's ringing me? No one is letting me in. Sorry, just bear with me. I will try and let you in. I have, I'll just pause the sharing. Just bear with me while I try and let, I'm not getting the, I've got somebody trying to get in. Samuel's trying to get in, but I can't actually see a request to let him in. So I don't know how to solve his problem. All right, we'll carry on. We'll carry on. Sorry, Samuel, we might have to catch up with you later. Can you see the screen again? Can you see the screen, people? Yep. Here we go, there we go, George. Right. Pause share. I'm just trying to make sure everybody who wants to come into the meeting has got in. Waiting room 1. George is just joining. Right, I hope everybody can see something again on the screen. Right, can somebody give me thumbs up to say they can see the screen again? Thumbs up. Yep, you can see the screen. Okay, let's carry on. I think there's a lesson here that we need to be on time because we didn't get going on time and it just disrupts the video when people come in late. So who's got their microphone? Right, right, okay. So let's just, So one of the things of setting priorities, we were in Proverbs 24, verse 27, which gives us this, I think I actually need to go back. This screen. We were on this screen. So setting priorities, we've got Proverbs 24, verse 27. It says there, prepare your work outside, get everything ready for yourself in the field, and after that, build your house. So it's talking there about priorities, because if you haven't got the field ready, then the harvest is going to come and go, and you're going to have no food to eat if you've spent time building your house first. So it's setting priorities within your either your family, your personal life, if you're not married, or your church life of what needs to happen first. Making a budget. If you don't know how much you need, you don't know what to pray for. And one of the things that we need to be in prayer is specific about what we're asking God for. So if we don't know how much our family needs, but we know right now immediately we have no food and we got nothing in the house and we've got no money, we're kind of throwing out those desperate prayers, Father, I need this, and this, but we don't really know how much we need because we don't know what it takes to run our family. And the other, build an emergency fund, which is something that is quite foreign, I think, to lots of people. Even in this side of the world, people don't have something to support behind them. They're spending everything they've got and they haven't got anything in the way of savings. So something crops up in an emergency, an unexpected bill, and they don't have any money, and it's panic, panic, panic. And I've been guilty, and we are still guilty of doing that from time to time. So it's part of knowing, and I'm talking here specifically about your family budget, of knowing what your family needs and the things that are coming up. Now, one of the, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but one of the things that I glean from Africans is that they actually are not very good at saving up for a rainy day, as we would call it this side of the world. They will get some money, suddenly they're wealthy and rich, and then they spend it all immediately and don't actually think of what's coming. And I recall a story that was told of this young African man, I think he was Ugandan, and he stole some money from a missionary that was about $400 that he saw on her desk, and stole the money. And he went around the town for the whole of the day, driving in a limousine. The driver was driving him around the town, and he was kind of showing off, look at me, look at me. And he spent the whole of the $400 American on this day trip round the town in this limousine. There's kind of a few integrity issues going on there. The first thing, that he stole the money in the first place. But the second thing is that he didn't actually use that money very wisely. And by the end of that day, the whole of the money was completely gone. So knowing what your family budget is, knowing the things that are going to come up, and putting some money aside and saving for those things, even if it's just a few hundred or a few thousand Ugandan shillings or Kenyan shillings or whatever, helps us to actually be prepared for what might come up. Avoiding debt, especially if you cannot repay. Now, debt obviously brings with it interest, and if you're not careful, you can get into a big financial nightmare if that interest is loan shark interest, and I'm sure you've got them in Uganda and Kenya and Ghana, Liberia. You need to be able to, if you're going to take on some debt, and I don't think that debt is necessarily a bad thing, you need to be able to know that you can support that debt until you have repaid it in full. And one of the things that we've done, and it's a program that any one of you could pick up and do with your people, is offer small interest-free loans. So there might be a fund that your church has built up, and you can say people can draw on that fund and set a limit, so it's not something that they can't repay, but give them an interest-free debt. Say, oh, we did this in Uganda and it was only like 500,000 Ugandan shillings. It wasn't a big amount, but it set them up doing a small business that they could then earn some money to support their family, but they knew they had to repay this debt back. And when the money came back in, it freed up that money then to go out to somebody else. So there was no interest charged, but there was a lesson to be learned that they had committed themselves to repay the debt, and also then starting to teach them what we talked about at the beginning of making a profit and loss for the business that they're going to do, because quite often they can start up a little business, and if it's selling food, for example, you can very quickly eat your profits away if you are not aware of how much you need to sell things for, or if you actually do physically eat the food yourself and you're not accounting for it as business expenses. And one of the other things is to try and reduce the risk as you age. Like for me and my husband Grant, as we're getting older now, we still have debt on our house, but we're getting less able to generate income from employment or business activities. So we are looking at ways that we can reduce that risk as we get older, because otherwise at this rate, I'll be working until I'm 80 to pay off our house debt. And it's interesting that money is the second most referenced topic in the Bible. It's mentioned over 800 times, but I don't think I can remember hearing too many sermons about handling money and how to handle money. It's kind of one of those taboo subjects that we don't touch, we don't talk about, yet so many people need some help in how to handle money. God has a lot to say about getting our finances right as we minister the gospel, not just the things that we showed at the beginning. Some of you have missed that part of, and you have to catch up with the video, but actually just having the integrity that we are the ones that are over and above as far as being truthful and with integrity in how we handle finances. So just some priorities that we need to think about. Avoid debt if you've no resources to pay it back. And family, our family is our first priority. And this is something that I'm probably quite passionate about in everything that happens in ministry, that it's our family that's our first mission field. And quite often I hear and see on Facebook of pastors and people that are always out doing evangelistic work and crusades, and they're maybe not so much as people get a little bit more years on their lives, but the younger men are not, family is not a priority. It's not as important. It's almost like the kingdom of God, I've got to go out and evangelize and no door to door, and all that is good stuff. But God is all about family. He's all about everything that he teaches, or we can learn from the scriptures. He's in a context of family. Husband, wife, children, it's all about growing up in a family. And so family is the first priority of getting our mission field right. And then once, I'm talking obviously now to people that are married, the husband-wife partnership becomes such a solid ground for then ministering out of. For those that are not married, they become the older brother and sister within the family of the church. Like if, we've got the individual family units and we've got the church family and then the wider church family, but it's always about family. That's what God is after, is that family unit. And that's what the enemy is so after, to try and destroy that family unit. In my part of the world, there is so much destruction around the family unit with same-sex relationships and children being adopted by two men or two women to be brought up and things like that going on. And gender changing, like children are taught in schools in this part of the world that it's okay to be what they're calling gender fluid, that if you think that you're a girl and you've been born with boy parts, then don't worry, we can fix that for you and we'll give you girl parts. And it's like, it's just going so upside down as Satan is trying to destroy that family unit of one man, one woman to raise up children. So that's my little hobby horse, that family is your first priority in mission. And giving, when we actually give, whether it's tithes or offerings or just alms giving, is a joint decision between the husband and wife once we're married. And it's especially if it's taking needed resources from the family. And that is something that some husbands and wives may start with, find that difficult to grasp. And it's something that we should teach as we encouraging and teaching young people that are going into married life, that it's a partnership. Husband and wife is a partnership that's going on if you're going to be successful in ministry. And it's powerful when you're doing that together. Knowing the family needs and the budget and living within your means is an important priority to get right. No good as soon as you get money into the hands, like that example that I showed you, just somebody going out and splashing out that money and wasting that money. Now, scripture tells us that God has given us the power to get wealth, and we need to be looking for the God-given opportunities that are right around us where we are, that God is giving us the dreams and the visions to actually make money and get wealth. And we as kingdom believers should be the ones that are operating in these financial resources. And there are certain laws that are in place, and whether you're a born-again believer or not, you can operate in those laws and be successful. And the Jewish nation, the Jewish people are very good at doing that. Unfortunately, some of us are not so good. So that's the end of the slides, and I'll stop the share and we'll come back. And we've got a bit of a fuss there going on. I don't know who that is in the thing, but I know some of you came into the session late, so you missed some of the earlier bits that I talked about, where I talked about presentation of balance sheet and profit and loss and things like that. So I'm going to open up for some questions. I'm going to stop the recording because on the video. So, okay, we've got 10 minutes left, and I'll just, for the video, because I did pause it, I'll just say that next week I'm going to look at tithes and offerings and giving under the new covenant and the new kingdom thing. But we've got 10 minutes left in this session, and that's the time for any questions or anything in particular that you want me to cover in next week's session. Go on, off you go, chat. Any questions?
Okay, I'm Peter. I hope you remember me.
I do, Peter.
Yes, my question is, yes. Okay, my question is, there is a situation whereby you are living levels, there is a level which you cannot go below that level because of the place you are living. Because, for example, the lowest rent you can afford maybe is 2,000. And maybe in that place, there's no any house that offers that such rent. And also you realize that your income is much lower than the expenses you need, even when you are living at the lowest level. So how can you start with that? Because it's a challenge. You realize that you're always in debt.
Okay, so you were it was a little bit distorted. It was a little hard to get exactly what you were saying, but I think you said, if you're living at your lowest level and you can't go any lower, how do you get out of that situation? Is that what you're asking? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think God gives us the power to get wealth. I don't know individual situation that you're in, Peter, but I think I would encourage you to have a look and see. We have this concept that we have to, everybody has to have their own house, their own, I don't know if you're married or whatever, but there is maybe a possibility to live a little bit more communal, if you know what I mean by that word. So there may be 1 or 2 families, 3 families coming together to kind of share resources. And that can be one way that people can get out of that lower level, because when you have a house, you've got the rent, the power, the water, before you even start with food. I mean, we have the same here. We've got mortgage and power and rates, and there's so much that we have to pay for before we can buy any food. But we've got quite a big house, so our situation in New Zealand is a bit different. So is there a way that you could come together with another family, for example, and share some of those basic costs? I'm suggesting, I don't know what your situation is, but I'm just trying to put some suggestions forward. The other thing is actually one of my favorite messages that I heard many years ago, and I've heard many people preaching a similar thing, is it's a message based around these 3 questions. Who are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? And what have you got in your hands? So 3 questions. Who are you? What are you doing here? And what have you got in your hands? So who are you? You're a child of God. What do you do? And then you can add more to that. What are you doing here? What is the purpose that God has put you where you are? And what do you have in your hands? Like what talents, gifts, abilities, what things have you got right now in your hands that you can use? And you can take those 3 questions and you can just think yourself, you can expand on that thought process. The other thing that happens this side of the world, I'm not sure if it would happen in your country the same, but there is things like, we call them community gardens. So there is a garden that it might be some land that somebody's gifted that the community grow food on. So it's not just one person's land. People come together and grow food for the community. So that is one thing that they do. We also have here things, and this is like New Zealand. People think we're really rich in New Zealand, but there are many, many people that are struggling. And we have things like, you can go into a place in our local town and they will give you food. You can ask for some food help. There is another place in our local town where people who have a little bit extra will put it there into the sharing shed, it's called. And it's just an area in the town. And if you had a little bit of food, you put it in there and somebody else could come and take that food. Now, I know the population is a lot more where you are, but that's perhaps something that a church could do if there's a little bit of land that they can grow some food on. And we farm differently. And we have what we call container gardens. So we grow food in smaller spaces and those kind of things. And there's a lot of sharing going on, even amongst non-Christians. People look after people within the community, and those concepts, I'm not sure whether you can pick up on some of those ideas for your situation, Peter. We've got just like 4 minutes left of the meeting. Is there anybody else with a question? Nice to see you, Emmanuel. Nice to see you. And we can't see Samuel, but I'm assuming he's there. He's very far. So any questions from anybody else?
Yeah, because of the way you talk about finances and I'm very much past that. Just telling me that I put my family first.
Yeah.
And I'm taking that money, the notice because I didn't know that concept so much, but I'm very much because of what we got today, and I hope I'm going to do something like that.
I can't hear you, Peter. The internet's unstable, and you're sounding a bit like a spaceman. I can't hear what you're saying. But if you want to put your question into the group later, I can try and answer that for you.
Yeah, the group.
So I'm going to sort of wrap up here because we've just got a couple of minutes left. And I encourage you, if you missed the beginning, when I put this recording into the group, to just have a look at the first part. I'm going to look at tithes and offerings and church giving next week. And any questions, please contribute into the group with your thoughts and comments. And I think we'll do Zoom again next week. And hopefully we can start off on time. And then if I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation, people are not missing the start of it. Okay, my friends. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next week. Have good Sundays, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.